What's up, Coachable family? Welcome back to the Coachable podcast. I'm your host, Tori Gordon, and today is going to be an incredible conversation. I'm so stoked for this because I have Dr. Amanda Hanson in the house. If you don't know who this is, she is the Midlife Muse. She's an incredible clinical psychologist, and she is here to empower women to be themselves. She is somebody I have followed for quite a while, and I'm so inspired and admire her work, and who I know you're going to get so much out of this conversation. Whether you're a man or a woman, whoever you are, this is a conversation about liberation and about truth and about stepping into your own power. And I know this will serve you. So Dr. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tori, for having me. Those are all the things that I care the most about, is that every single person steps fully into that divine essence, what they were made for in this life. And no apologies, no hiding, just front and center.
So can you tell us who you are and what you do and why you do it?
Yes, I'm a clinical psychologist for over 25 years now, and my specialty is primarily working with women. But of course, by default, I work with partners and their children, and not that they are my clients, but I serve them through the women that I serve. Because in the work that we do together, it has that beautiful overflow effect where the changes that these women make and their own individual lives often overflow for the betterment of everyone who is surrounding them, friends, coworkers, family. I am primarily in a space of working with women in midlife because there's a reckoning that happens in this 40 to like 60-year-old range where everything that you signed up for, said yes to when you were in a place of princess energy and seeking energy. Oftentimes you open your eyes and you look around and it no longer matches the woman you've become. And so renegotiations begin, and women are often at that time of their life really seeking this redo. And so it's helping them reconstruct from the place of where they are at that point in their life. That's essentially the essence of the work that I do.
Okay. So you've already tapped on some things that I'm like excited to jump into with you, which is this idea of the archetype of the princess and who that is, and how we can start to, as women, start to identify if we're in the energy of the princess currently, or if we have been, and what that journey is like to becoming what I know you also talk about, which is the queen. So can you maybe start us there with helping to define and help us identify what the difference is between the princess and the queen?
Yes, absolutely. So for myself, I know that the princess was running a really good portion of my life until I was probably in my early to mid 30s. And she still shows up. She showed up last 2 Saturdays ago. You know, she's still near and dear to me, and I treasure her, and she served me super well for a long time. But it's that really, at a certain point in life, when you're a little girl and you're running around and you're like, dress up dress, and you're playing the princess, it's super appropriate at that time in your life. I think where the big miss happens is the princess runs around and looks for validation and seeking, as little girls typically do. And I think where we sometimes get tripped up is, as parents, well-intended but misinformed often parents who didn't have this modeling for them, they don't ever stop and ask the princess, well, how do you feel? Well, what do you think? What would you like to do next or differently? What is your dream? And so oftentimes young girls, the research shows around the age of 10 to 12 years old, she looks up and realizes that the world has a different plan for her. And to be accepted and worthy and pleasing and chosen, she starts to contort herself and gets every year further and further away from herself. Part of the reason why, as the decades go on, the increase of antidepressants also rises. Because every decade that goes by, she's further removed from that essence of who she was. So we don't train young girls how to be. We train young girls how to seek. And so we have grown women. I just finished a retreat in North Carolina 2 days ago, and we have incredibly successful, abundant women, for all intents and purposes, running around thinking they've got most things figured out. But in reality, when push comes to shove, they are operating from a really wounded, princess, victim-y energy. And princess is not meant as an insult. I named these archetypes for myself so that I could pay attention to when I was going in or out of one of them. And that queen energy is the energy of being. She's being the self-validation, the self-worth, the self-love, the self-trust. So that's a difference as opposed to the seeking energy.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm thinking about the princess energy for myself and how that shows up for me and how it has shown up. Because it's interesting because you talk about working with women in midlife, and I'm a little bit younger than that. I'm early in my 30s, but I'm wondering, like, how do we, I don't, for the women that are listening, wherever they are in their journey and of age, it doesn't matter. But like for those of us, I was like, I don't want to get to midlife and then wake up one day and be like, wait, all the things I was chasing aren't actually what's really important. And I'm disconnected from who I really am and what I really want. And so how can we prevent or start now before we get to this like midlife, part in our life where we're like realizing we're so disconnected from ourselves? Is there a way we can start earlier and reconnect sooner? You know what I mean? Because you said decade after decade, we're just getting further and further away from the truth of who we are, which is embedded deep in our essence and core, but we have been programmed, conditionally programmed to look outside of ourselves so that the world tells us who we are instead of sourcing that from an inner source. Where do you tell women, whether they're working with you in retreat or through your work of any kind, like how do we start to come out of that princessy energy and return to the queen? Is there a journey that you have to go back to the child? Oh. I imagine there is.
The journey is beautiful and quite a process. There's in my work, I would just say there's no like these 3 steps. I don't believe in Band-Aid solutions or overnight fixes. They never work. That's why inspirational quotes will never take you anywhere in your life. And even self-help books to an extent. I mean, self-help books are wonderful, but again, this is a lifestyle. So when women step into working with me, we talk about the philosophy of Midlife Muse. We talk about the lifestyle of the queen. This isn't like, we're going to put these 3 mantras on our wall and say them every morning and it's going to happen, because we are living in a world and a society where everywhere, and I know because I am 51 years old, and not only do I have clients around the world, but I do this work every day for my life. And I know what it takes to keep immaculate internal housekeeping. I know what it takes to source from within and not outside of myself. And that is not for the faint of heart.
No, I was talking about this morning. I was writing about ritual and the practice of sacred ritual for yourself. And what you were talking about the work that it takes to like keep this inner world immaculate. It's like, I was having this whole kind of vision of how as a culture and as a society, we're so programmed to look outside of ourselves and to focus on the external. All of our senses are pointed outward. Like we get up and we ritualize our hygiene. We brush our teeth twice a day. We take a shower. Especially as women, we put on all the makeup. We do all of the things, right, to be presentable because we're so fixated on our external appearance. But we don't do the energetic, the emotional, the spiritual, and the mental hygiene to keep the internal world clean and tidy and together. And that's what I see is like when I meet and talk with women, and I can feel it when they're so fixated and focused on how does everything look versus how do I feel? And the reason I wanted to have you on this podcast and have this conversation, because like I'm so locked in with you and I love the way you think, is I want people to build lives that feel as good as they look. Not just look good, because I was that woman that woke up one day when I was dating a Major League Baseball player and living in a penthouse apartment, and I woke up with no purpose and no fulfillment, and I had everything that looked really great, but on the inside I was hollow and empty and disconnected and lost. And I realized then I didn't have to, I was not in my midlife at that time. I was mid-20s, but I was like, this is not it. I thought this was what I wanted, but what I'm yearning for is something so much deeper. And I have to go on a whole new path to figure out what that is.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what happens is we have this invisible, unspoken patriarchal checklist of what it is supposed to be. You get the things, you check them off one by one, and then life's going to feel amazing.
Right.
And
That's
what
what
I
we're
have
promised.
found is most women spend half their life checking the boxes. They arrive to the middle of their life and they're like, why do I feel so empty?
Yeah.
And I don't believe it's a midlife crisis. I believe it's a midlife awakening, because you've arrived at this point and you're like, half of my life, if all goes well, is over. And I've done all the things everyone told me to do. And I feel like something is missing. And the scariest part is I don't know what is missing. And I was that woman. I was that woman who had a life that when I would sit around with my group of girlfriends, I felt guilty sharing that I wasn't fully happy, because I had the life that everyone dreamed of. And they would literally say to me, Amanda, there is nothing else. That something else you're dreaming of does not exist. And I now understand why that was their answer. That was the best they had, because I understand now, they hadn't tapped into what I've been vibing off of for the last 11 to 12 years.
Yes.
I know that that's the best answer they could give, because they have never sourced what I'm living off of.
Ooh.
And so it makes a lot of sense when women are like, but you have everything.
Yes.
What more could you want? They didn't understand that the more I wanted had nothing to do with anything that the patriarchy told me would make me happy.
Well, and that's when we tell women, be grateful for what you have.
Yes, Tori, I just wrote a chapter in my book. I called it the gratitude trap. We literally tell women, be grateful for what you have. And I teach my clients, I love gratitude. Absolutely. You better believe it. The list of my gratitudes are endless. But let me tell you what else is endless. My ravenous spirit, my level of desire for what I'm calling in for this life is as long, if not longer, than what I'm grateful for. And women are blown away by that. They're like, what? And so I help them reactivate and get in touch with what else are you desiring for this? The fact you're even here, the fact you were even born, there were so many more chances that you wouldn't be here. The fact that you're here and you're going to let your life just pass you by and never claim that purpose that you were born for is devastating. And when I help them tap into that, they usually get pretty damn motivated, because I share with every woman, you were made for purpose. And when you step into it, the whole world gets brighter because of it. But women fear their brightness. And they fear their shine. And so they typically are like, well, I'll just stand next to somebody and call that good enough.
Yes. Okay. So I have a women's group program called Revive Women that I run, and it's all about helping women wake up to this same realization. And recently in there, I posted Marianne Williamson's quote from A Return to Love. I love Marianne Williamson. She's been on the show. She's fantastic. And I love this book. I reread it multiple times, but it's all around how, I'm sure you know the quote. It's like, it's not that our darkness, it's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Yeah. Who am I to be brilliant, and sexy and gorgeous and talented? And then she goes on to say, well, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. You are meant to shine as all children do. And it doesn't serve the world that you put your light and you shove it in a corner so no one can see it, so that someone else doesn't feel insecure around you. And that's what we do as women, is we're like, oh, we're afraid of our brightness. And one of the women in my program recently, she was like, what I'm realizing is I'm afraid of my goodness. I'm afraid of my goodness. I'm afraid to be too good, because what does that mean? It means there will be women who fall away, right? And I was telling the women when I opened on the retreat on Thursday evening, is that over the next couple of days, you're going to be super activated by me. You are going, at moments, you're going to wish you never came. At moments, you're going to be deeply triggered. At moments, you're going to wonder towards me, who does she think she is?
And I want to normalize all that
Yeah.
because when you see a woman claim this much and showcase this much and claim that much and be that in love with herself, the automatic conditioned response is for us to point the finger. She's too much. She's full of herself. What's wrong with her? And rather than, and what I love to do in my own personal life and journey all my clients into, every time I feel activated, triggered, envious, I now, years ago, would make her somehow wrong. Like, oh, it must have just all gotten handed to her. She somehow got lucky, whatever, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Not realizing that every time I did that, I would never be an energetic match for what she had, because you can never attract what you despise or what you're envious of. So what I traded it out for in this princess to queen time of my life was, okay, Amanda, what does she have that you desire more of in your life? What is she claiming? Is it about her success? Is it about her love with her body? Is it her relationship? Is it her financial freedom? What is it? And then I can work with that, because what it's actually showing me is more about myself.
Yep.
It's showing me what I want more of, rather than repelling myself away from her. And then I'll never ultimately get that thing anyways. So that work is really important to me, to trade our triggers in for our activations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did a podcast on this recently, that like our triggers are the roadmap to our healing. So for me, it's like a green flag instead of a red flag of triggers. It's like, oh, this is where the work is. Like, start paying attention to like go inward when you're activated, because there's something in you that wants to come up to be healed. And you know, as you're talking about like, who does she think she is, or this must have been handed to her, or like this energy of like, oh, despising. Oh, like I remember like in our community, we have developed this amazing women's group, like the amazing group of men and women, frankly, but the women are really coming together, and we've had to work through the sister wound and the mother wound and all these things that come up essentially when you get women together, and the betrayal and the competition and, you know, oh, well, are you a threat to me? You know what I mean? And the ways in which other women will activate the parts of you that might have been dormant. And a lot of us, especially going through COVID, and we've all been in isolation where we haven't had to be around people. Then you get around people again and you're like, oh, that rubs me the wrong way. That rubs me the wrong way. But for me, it's like this, like fertile ground for looking at all of the things within me, you know? And one of the things that I'm so fascinated about is really helping women activate their voice. And so I want to know if you have like any advice, any tips, because as what I'm noticing is that there are so many women who maybe they're starting the journey inward. They're starting to look within themselves, not externally. They're realizing, whether they're in midlife, they're in their 20s, they're in their 60s, it doesn't matter when, they're starting to realize, okay, what's out there isn't fixing what's in here. So let me maybe start to look within myself, whether that's through some kind of spiritual practice, a meditation practice, whatever. And I'm curious, because I have friends who have the ability to really connect with themselves, maybe in a journaling practice or in a practice that's like very just for them, but they're struggling with activating the voice and claiming their truth and saying it out loud. Do you have recommendations for women who are struggling in that area?
I have so many, and it won't make sense out of context, but I do take women through these practices, and I will be taking women through this practice at my event in November in Phoenix. But I take women through rage release practice.
Yes. Okay.
Until you've connected to your rage, journaling, meditating, yoga practices, none of that really sedentary, non-evocative work helps you tap into your voice in the way that we're speaking of.
Okay.
There's a very different energy that moves and flows when you learn how to make primal sounds. And I know that the closest I came to this work was giving birth naturally and activating that warrior inside of me. The extent to which you can open your legs and your yoni is the extent to which you can open your throat.
Oof.
So rage release practices, orgasmic practices, those are the direct route, because your vocal cords, I don't know if you know this, but when you were in utero, when you were 14 weeks in utero, your vocal cords were connected to the ovaries. And as you grew, they extended and now they are connected by the vagus nerve. And so your vagus nerve can either be activated through the primal moaning that I teach here. It can also be activated through deep G-spot and cervical orgasm, but you need one to activate the other, and not in performance energy, but in claiming energy. And so those are some of the practices that I do personally, and also that I take all my clients through. Yes. And women are like in their 50s, 60s and beyond, and sometimes in their early 20s. I have, clients from 22 to 78, and they all tell me, Amanda, I don't know if I can do this. I'm like, you can do this. And we walk them through it, obviously, and we do it as a group. And when they get on the other side of it, they're like, what just happened to me? I've never felt that kind of vibration and connection in my body. I'm like, I know. I can even tell the difference when I start working with clients individually or in small groups. They have a different tone to their voice when they start working with me. The longer they work with me, the deeper it drops. And then they're speaking from between their legs. They're speaking from that womb space, as opposed to the princess girl up here. You know, you can start to hear the difference in how the tonation of their voice.
So powerful. I'm just thinking back to my own experience in tapping into rage. And when I first started my spiritual awakening, I went through a lot to get me to this point, but I had lost my mother to cancer, and I had gone through a really horrible breakup, and I just was thrown into the depths of this crisis, or awakening, and of reestablishing who am I, what am I here to do, why am I here, why am I alive, and how can I live in a way that makes me actually want to be alive. And I worked with an amazing coach, and she, part of what we did on retreat was rage work. And I had never done that before, but it helped me release so much that I had been holding and storing in my body. And I had no idea that was the beginning of my relationship to the mind-body connection. And so I'm curious, for you as a clinical psychologist, what is your take on this? Because where does talk therapy fall short? Because I don't know many therapists in terms of cognitive behavioral therapy that are helping women get in touch with their womb and in touch with their rage.
No, and it's really why I traditionally stepped out of that. And for me, it was when I started to understand, even again, the power of my own body, when I was sitting in rooms learning from women, when I was pregnant with my first child, learning from women, and it was their second, third, fourth birth. And I was going and communing with these women on my lunch hour and watching them and listening to them tell their stories. And I got my hands on everything I could find and some videos as well to see, the good old VHS tapes to watch women do this. And that's when I started to connect to that feminine power. And I thought to myself, this is so interesting, because in all my years of graduate school, I never learned anything about any of this. There's nothing about somatics. And even if I take it a step further and think about everything I learned, 99% of it came from men teaching different philosophies. And if we look at even some of the stuff Freud passed down, well, we're so thankful that the world of psychology really had language because of him. It is extremely anti-feminine and is so ridiculously toxic towards women. So I started to understand that also talk therapy was a obviously very cerebral process that doesn't change it doesn't change the cellular structure. It doesn't change the nervous system. It doesn't change that imprint in the body the same way that these somatic practices do. And I work with women who have been in talk therapy for over 20 years, and they come to me and they say, Amanda, 3-4 sessions in, how is it possible that I've made such huge movement in my life? I didn't even tap into this. How? 20 years. And I help them understand that often there's a motivation to keeping you coming back and opening that wallet and not actually getting anywhere off the turntable of, tell me how that made you feel. What does that remind you of? All those basic, I'm sure not every psychologist is trained. Of course, there's beautiful in-depth practices, but ultimately, I just don't think that we have moved the needle very far. And then, we prescribe to people, and nothing changes there.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. Because that was my experience until I started to find somatic work. I had a dear friend who is also a relationship expert and somatic experiencing practitioner. And she was like, there's a real difference between personal development and healing,
Big time. I mean, how about some of a couple of women said to me this weekend, I've been to every possible personal development conference or this or that. And I'm like, sure. And you probably walked away with some great bumper sticker phrases. And I'm sure you felt rah, 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 hooray, hooray, hooray. Push through, don't give up, high five yourself all the time. I'm sure there's some great inspiration there, but moving the needle for women starts on the floor of your life, starts inside of the body, starts with there's so much that gets unearthed. And until women do that, everything else, and I will say this to the end because I've been doing this for over 25 years, everything else is barely scratching the surface of what's really going on for you. Yeah. And it is no coincidence that the majority of women who hire me end up getting off. This is their own personal decision, but because they feel so connected to themselves, because they feel so capable of even not being afraid of their pain anymore and knowing they have tools to work through it, most women who come to me end up getting off their antidepressants or anti-anxieties because they realize they want to feel again. They want to feel it all. And they were terrified, didn't think they were capable of feeling it all. And so they come back alive. I mean, this weekend, I worked with, there were many, many, many women there, but one woman in particular announced in front of the whole group that the final night at the retreat, of course, back in her own room, but she had the first orgasm in the past 10 years of her life. And she'd completely given up on any idea of it. And she said, I can't even believe this is happening for me. I said, because you're coming back to life. So when your spirit's coming back to life, everything, all your nerves are starting to regenerate, everything is being reignited. And something as beautiful as that, women who came to me with rheumatoid arthritis this weekend at the retreat who were like, Amanda, I shouldn't have been able to do the movements you had us doing. Not only was I able to do them, I felt invigorated for the days after. This weekend's the first time in 10 years I haven't felt pain in my physical body, right? Because that pain, that inflammation is all the unprocessed gunk and garbage that you've been stuffing down your whole life.
Yes, but what you're doing is you're reminding them and speaking life into them. You are capable. You are capable. And how many women say, I don't know what to do. I can't do this, because we're taught not to trust ourselves.
That's right.
And our own bodies. And so we're like, no. And you're saying, yes, you can. Yes.
Not only yes, you can, but when you do, because a lot of them I'm afraid, I've always thought that if I actually tapped into that abuse that happened to me as a child, I would have a nervous breakdown. I said, no, you're going to actually have a nervous breakdown by not feeling it and releasing it. Yes. Because you're going to have cancer or an autoimmune disease, because that fossil fuel that is building up and corroding your every single organ, every single part of your body, that is more likely to kill you than it is to feel it. Because every time we tap into our rage is always unalchemized passion. It's the flip side of the coin. It's what we wish would have been different, right? And so to stuff that down, takes a big energetic to stuff that down and hold it down and not feel it. Yes. That's where excessive shopping, scrolling, alcohol, drugs, all the numbing mechanisms to just get through another evening and not feel it. Overworking, all of the things are mechanisms.
So I have a friend who is a dear, she's a medicine woman in her own way. She serves tea to me. We sit in tea together, and we sit on the floor and we sit in silent tea. And it is a deep spiritual, meditative, powerful experience. For an hour, we sit in silence and we serve tea and we just go within. And it's like the thought that came to me recently when we were sitting in tea and we were sharing, because we will journal sometimes, and we'll just, this is our opportunity just to hear our own thoughts, observe our own thoughts, see what's coming and bubbling up to the surface for us. And also from higher mind, from a greater intelligence of what wants to come through and how can I listen to that? And so we were sharing our journal entries and what we had written after. And one of the imagery that came through for me was the collective feminine has been like this ice cube. It's like the ice queen. And she's slowly, when we start to do this work, it starts to melt. And this part of us that's been disassociated, it's been frozen. It's our traumatized parts that have just not felt safe. So we've had to just clench every aspect of ourselves and hold on for dear life. And we've gone through life in such a dysregulated state, frozen, disassociated state. And when we start to come back into the body and our senses start to wake up and we're like, oh, this is me in here. I get the almost like, I don't know why this idea of like Shrek is coming to me, like Fiona, the prince, the queen, but she's like morphing and she's like, what's happening to me? Because you're softening and you're returning to your heart and to your felt sense, into your body, into your womb, into your soul, into this part of you that has always been there, but it has not, you've been talked out of it. You've been traumatized out of it and you've been frozen into this numb state, and the culture profits off of that.
Oh, it sure does. It sure does. The multi-billion-dollar industry of how many other places can we promise you that this will make you feel amazing? This will promise to give you the love of your life. Or here's the, even the magazines that, like, I don't know how much this still happens. I remember this from when I was younger, but 5 steps to give the best blowjob, right?
Yes,
it's like,
yeah.
Rather than learning how to worship within so that you can then worship with somebody else's body, that doesn't come until you learn how to drink at your own temple first.
Yes.
It is a performance. Otherwise, it's nothing more than that.
100%. Okay. So I want to bring it back to, would you say the princess is really a performance? Is like that, are those two things linked?
Yes.
Okay. And so if the princess's kind of archetype is really this one that's seeking outside of herself, she is, she's performing, she's pleasing, she's trying to put
emotionally dysregulated. She feels frenetic. She doesn't feel safe to be around as another woman.
She's trying to fit in, not draw enough attention to me so that boys like me, but not too much so the girls don't want to be my friend, and all of those things, And so, and then this evolution or this rebirth to the queen. So I want to share something from a dear friend of mine who recently had a really powerful psychedelic experience. And what with mushrooms, and she had this epiphany, this revelation through the medicine that she was in fact both the queen and the princess, or the slave girl, the working girl, the one that was the housekeeper. And she was, that version of her was like locked in the dungeon. And she could see that she held the key, but she also kept herself enslaved into this dungeon. And this whole understanding of like, who am I going to choose? Because I can be either or. And I've locked myself, I've hidden myself away. I haven't spoken, I haven't come into the light. And both exist within the kingdom. But like, do I want to stand in my power and lead and be the woman that I know I can be, or am I going to hide away? And that is a choice. That is a choice that I get to decide, and no one gets to decide for me. And that awareness was so powerful. So this is something that has been part of the conversation in my community a lot. I'm curious, like, how do you define the queen archetype, and what are some of those fundamental things that really describe the energy of the queen when we start to embody her?
Yeah, well, the queen is living her life. So, we think of all the things that we want in this lifetime. We want love. We want to be accepted. We want to be seen. We want to feel worthy. We want to feel special, right? So let's just say if every woman listening just made a basic list of what is it she really has been seeking in life and partnership and success outside of herself, then becoming the queen takes that list one thing at a time. And it's learning how to become worthy. It's learning how to become love. It's learning how to become self-validating. But I can tell you, this is going to be probably really hard to hear for a lot of people listening. I have yet to find very many women who can really, truly, fundamentally begin that work because I see women can't even look at themselves in the mirror. When women go to the mirror, they go to critique, they go to cover up, they go to criticize, they go to berate. So I rarely see women, and part of my life practice and one of the things I teach is spending 3 minutes in the mirror every morning before you even turn your phone on, when your hair's crazy, and just communing with yourself and coming from a place of pure reverence. And being able to see the humanity within yourself and the miracle of yourself, when that took root inside of me after about probably 90 days, when that took root inside of me, you know what, Tori, I couldn't buy anything. You can't sell me anything because I'm not afraid. I don't color my hair. I don't do Botox. I don't do fillers. I don't need any of that BS because I know that I'm the source of everything beautiful. I know that anything that would try to tell me otherwise is a lie and a mass marketing machine that needs me to stay fearful to that belief. So I see a lot of spiritual, there's a lot of great spiritual stuff happening in the world, but there's still so much bypassing. There's still so much performative spirituality. And I don't think that we've been brave enough as women to sit around and talk about that.
Yes.
Because there was a retreat going on next door to where I was hosting my retreat this weekend. Actually, there were 4 retreats happening simultaneously, and they were calling me, the shuttle driver at the retreat center was calling me the scary lady. And everybody else was like, oh, I heard she's really scary. What's going on in those rooms? The women were asking the women at my retreat at the fire pit that night, what's going on in that room? Because what happens at a lot of these retreats is for some of them, there's a lot of this flower crowns and spiritual bypassing and it's all going to be okay. And we do this super high level conversation, but very few leaders are able, I think, to get deep down in the guts of it because they don't even, they haven't even taken themselves there. You can't take somebody where you've never been. And they were asking, Amanda, were you serving the women ayahuasca on this retreat? I said, absolutely not. Well, what was all that noise coming from that room, that wailing and that screaming and that raging? I said, I know how to get women there without anything, because even that, and nothing against people who do psychedelics or ayahuasca or any of the things at all. But honestly, my very strongly held opinion is that is still believing that you need something outside of yourself it's almost like I need to do this to validate what I feel inside. Why can't we just learn to actually validate what we feel inside? Why can't we learn to go to those depths, those incredibly unbelievable places? So that's the work that I do.
I love this.
I'm willing to continue to call it out over and over and over again. For me, I know how to take women there. I don't have to give them anything to drink or take.
Yeah. It's so powerful, but that's the thing. You can't lead people places you've never been. And so unless I was posting this the other day, there's a lot happening in the spiritual healing, personal development world. And for me, my biggest critique when I look for who I want to look up to is, do you walk the talk? Are you embodied? Do you embody what you talk about? And it's almost like a company culture that if you've ever for me, I think back to the first company I ever worked for out of college, and they touted this amazing company culture and these values. But within the first 2 weeks, I realized that was just a performance and that we're not really about people and we're really not about this and we're really not about that. Right. And you can sniff bullshit out pretty quickly. And so I look for the embodiment, and that requires the leader or the healer or the whoever sitting in that role to be in the work continuously. And that work takes you into the depths of yourself and your psyche and your body and your trauma. And that is a dark place. And so I want to talk about, the healing work is not about love and light. It's about going into the darkness and confronting your deepest shame and your deepest wounding and your deepest fears head on, full on, like say it with your chest, let's go. You know what I mean? So can you speak to what that's looked like for you personally and coming to your terms with your own darkness, and how do you transmute that? And because I know you as a woman, you don't stand here in your power the way you are without having gone to those places, because you can't access that level of power unless you go to those places. So what does that look like for you personally?
It's so true. And you can't access that fierceness, and you can't remove the apology from your voice. And you can't, when you're coming from a wounded, unrooted, unintegrated place, you can't do all the things. And before I get into, I'm happy to answer that. I do think that what I have found is a lot of women come to me, and they come after having worked with certain leaders that when the curtain was pulled back, it wasn't really the Wizard of Oz. It was the little man standing on the box, right? Yep. And there's a lot of really unhealthy things happening, a lot of wounding. And I feel like a lot of the practices are actually, when push comes to shove, getting women further away from their divinity than closer. So yeah, that I have so much endless things to say about that. I especially have a lot to say about men leading those spaces for women, because I'm never going to hire a man to take me to a place that he's never been. I don't care how skilled he is. I don't care what he offers. I've been learning from the patriarchy how to be a woman for most of my damn life, and I'm done. I'm done taking rules to my life from someone who doesn't have a womb space. And I don't mean you still have to have a womb. You never had to have children. You could have had a hysterectomy. That's irrelevant to me. But if you haven't walked the life of a woman, you can step aside for me, because where are the women leaders? Where are they, Tori? Like, I'm talking grounded divine mothers leading us.
Please tell me where you find them. I'm looking at one, I believe, but like, I'm looking for them. Where are they?
You know, I said that to my best girlfriend recently. She's like, oh, I was listening to this guy's podcast and I read this book, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, where are the women that you're learning from and leading from? And I was on a podcast a couple of days ago, and the same question came up, and she's like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. You know, so we really have to turn this over for ourselves. But for me, everything that I teach in my work, and I mean everything, in the same way that I brush and my teeth, I floss my teeth, I scrape my tongue, if I do oil pulling, the same level of oral hygiene I have that same kind of emotional hygiene. I am radically responsible with my life and how I show up. And I'm on the floor in this studio more times in a month than I would like to admit.
Yeah.
And I'm actually, no, I take that back. Not that I'm proud of, because I have a responsibility to my husband, to my children, to my clients, to you and your 1 hour of your precious life right now, to show up in energy that feels so clean and real and mine, right? And what the world decides to do with that, or how they want to interpret that, is up to them. But it is my responsibility to make sure that I am an emotionally hygienic woman.
Yeah.
And so all of these practices, every morning, from the moment I wake up and all the way through my day, I'm responsible for how am I feeling, what's going on. Do we need to get on the floor? Do we need a rage release right now? Do we need a somatic practice? Do we need to dance this out? Do you just need a good self-pleasure orgasm right now? What do you need, Amanda? So it's always me being able to go back, and I'm always dancing with and looking at the princess in me, the victim-y places that want to show up, and the shadows. I will never be a leader who pedestalizes myself or stands on some place that says I've got it all figured out. And to me, it's like, those are the leaders I want to run from. Yes. I don't trust people who say that they're infallible.
Yes, I completely agree. When did you start to get in touch with your own shadow and darkness? Like, really, and start to get out of the cerebral, thinking mind and connect to like that powerful place?
Probably not until my early to mid 30s.
Yeah.
I started to come into an emotional maturity that I think before the narrative was like, that was bad, that was wrong. It would be shameful if anybody knew. I could barely look at it myself. Right. And then I recognized how beautiful all of that was in me. And it was almost always a wound or an unmet need. And if I could tap into that part of like what lived underneath it, it really helped me. And there's a great book that I recommend. I know it's somewhat controversial to a lot of people, but it's really helped me a long time ago. And it's helped a lot of clients, is Existential Kink.
Okay. Amazing.
By Carolyn Elliott. And she really talks about, I had to look at, a decade and a half ago even, I had to start really looking at, Amanda, You are so tied into this victim story about your dad leaving when you were little. It's almost like you get off on it. You get off on being the victim. And I started to pay attention to that for myself and really did the extremely hard to look at work of like, that became my identity. And I started to recognize that I was scared of releasing the story or the rope of the girl whose dad left when she was 10, because it had served me so well. And it turned me into this like badass bitch. But that badass bitch was not super emotionally accessible to many people in her life, nor herself. And so I really had to start to unravel from that. And the scary part is like, for many of us, when we do that work, okay, if I step out of that, then what is my identity? There's that liminal space between shedding one before we fully have another one. And that I think can be so scary when our body has learned how to play that victim story over and over again.
Yes. I'm so glad you shared that. Thank you. I recently watched your post about your reconciliation, the healing work that you've done with your dad, which was so powerful to watch. And even just what you said about, you know, this badass woman that had been created out of this story of victim. It's like, almost, it's like, this is our protector. This is like a protector part of us that has come out and like still is in the light and has gotten a lot of praise for that. And it's like, oh, look what I've made out of my sad story. And I can continue, and almost like how that's our ego in certain ways. You know, even the ego is like, I've been the most hurt. I've been the most hurt. And look what I've made out of myself. You know what I mean? To release that is like, who am I without that story?
Absolutely.
And that takes you back to the little girl. Right.
And that feels scary because I knew this role really, really well. It's part of what my partner fell in love with. It's part of what made me successful in so many aspects of my life. It was the one that made all the friends and family come to me when somebody needed the help or the rescuing. It gave me this sense of worthiness.
Yes.
And so to lean back and say, I don't actually want to be that strong anymore. Not in that way. Yes. I actually am really tender inside, and there are times I feel sad. And, you know, I can give you an example of this.
Please.
2 weekends ago, I was with one of our children and my husband, and there was a situation where we had been with our son a lot, and we hadn't had time, just the two of us, like for you know, more than like 20 minutes. And so there was a moment on this weekend getaway that I was looking forward to maybe stealing 20 or 30 minutes away just with my husband. And I was sitting outside and had asked him to come and join me. Well, the assumption was he was coming to join. He's like, yeah, I'll be out there. When he came out, he's like, oh my gosh, it's so hot out here. I just took a shower. I don't want to start sweating again. So he went back in where the air conditioning was. And the princess in me got so activated. I haven't seen her like that active for like several months, right? The story, the old story, it's even all this time later, it's so hard to get rid of that story. And the story starts to play. He doesn't love you. He'd rather be comfortably like temperature comfortable than sit next to you. The temperature and his comfortability is more important than you are. He's not even interested in spending that much time with you. I feel abandoned, right? The stories, and now the more I'm letting that run on loop, now the more upset I'm getting. Then the upset, because I don't want to feel like the tenderness of it, now I'm mad. Now I'm like, well, who cares? I don't want to sit with him anyways. And this is all playing out in a matter of like 20 seconds in my head, right?
Oh, I'm literally tracking with you. I'm like, I've been here. I know this road.
So in that moment, I say to myself, okay, Amanda, what archetype do you want to play tonight? Do you want to ride the baby princess out? Because we know how this is going to go. You're going to go in for dinner. You're going to not make eye contact. You're going to get through dinner. You're going to play a little bit cold, and then you're going to turn yourself into bed early. Do you want to do that one? Because we know that one real well.
That's where we throw a fit.
Yeah. Or do you want to lean in and say what you're really feeling right now? Do you want to be the queen and step into that vulnerable power that's within you right now? So I texted him and said, I'm sad that you're not out here with me. He probably almost broke his ankle because I barely pushed send, and he opened the door. He's like, babe, oh my gosh, I didn't know it was going to make you like feel alone. I said, well, it makes me feel like you don't even want to be with me. And he's like, of course I want to be with you. So he sits down next to me, pulls me onto his chest. He's like, of course I want to be with you. And then I didn't go into my brain like, does he really? Is he just saying that? I'm like, I said my need, I let him meet it, and I just softened and surrendered. And then I went on to have 3 unbelievable orgasms that evening.
Hell yeah.
So it's like, there's the, like, otherwise, I know I would have been closed off, shut down. I would have rejected any advances. I probably would have asked him to sleep in the other room or something. I mean, that's how far we can let that go. And I'm willing to sit here and own all of that as a 51-year-old woman, because I just don't think we hear enough stories of leaders who are like, here's where my vulnerable spots are. Here's where my tenderness comes in. Here's where I slip back into that princess. And here's what it looks like to sit with it and say, okay, Mindy, you've got a choice. What do you want to do right now? Do you want to like create a distance, or do you want to make magic? And surrendering every time like that feels scary in the beginning. And it feels, sometimes our heads can get confused and we think it's weakness, but it's so beautiful. It's just, my gosh, it's the only place I want to keep living, but my brain will lie to me.
But it's really like, I hold the key. I hold the key. Do I want to keep myself locked in this dungeon and play the princess and be alone and feel sad and then like go to bed in self-pity? Or am I going to use this key, and which is this choice? That is really what it is. That I can soften, I can speak my need, I can ask for what I need, and then I can allow myself to receive it, versus now I have to push it away because I've been taught that. No, it's like, this art of allowing and this art of receiving is that feminine archetype of like the queen that's like, I get to have it. I get to have it. I get to receive it. And for me, it came in a couple years ago, this awareness in the form of this question that I kept asking myself. So I started to become aware of how I participate in my own suffering.
Wow.
There's a lot that's happened to me that I did not ask for. Maybe my soul did. I don't know if I signed up for some curriculum, ahead of time. And this was on my school list of things I had to learn. But like consciously, I didn't ask for certain things that I've had to deal with in my life. But there are so many more of the things that I have chosen to participate in that has created more suffering in my life. And so the question came is like, will you continue to participate in the creation of your own suffering? And you don't have to. Like, you have a choice. Like, you get to have this desire, you have this longing, and then you can allow that to be met when you speak your need. But you have to allow it in, versus I have to be hard and like, whatever. And it's like, so much for me of when I'm in the embodiment of the queen, it's like, let me be taken care of. Let me receive the thing I need, versus trying to pretend that I'm okay without it.
Yes. And side by side with that is, and let me lead you and our family and show you the beauty of being this emotionally expanded person.
Yeah.
Because I really do believe, as the women of our lives, we are the emotional leaders of our families and of the betterment of everyone around us. I mean, I've seen it firsthand, what's happened to my family because of my emotional leadership. And my 3 sons, I know that their divine masculine energy shows up so strong because they've been emotionally led by a woman who is really strong in the emotionality of it all. We can't learn that from an ungrounded, unhealthy, unintegrated mother or leader. And I also think for a lot of us, we didn't have women or mothers, that well-intended, beautiful women in their own rights. But my mother, at least, was deeply, deeply steeped in patriarchal conditioning. Yeah. She could never teach me how to be a queen, because she's, to this day, I mean, the princess energy runs the show. It's all she's ever known.
Yes.
And so that's what I was taught. And somewhere there's always one pattern breaker and someone in the lineage who's going to set a different story. And those are the kinds of women who come to my events and come to my retreats and sign up to work with me, because they have that feeling that it gets to be more beautiful.
Yeah, it does. Follow that feeling. Follow that feeling. Please, please, please. That's what we want you to hear. You're so powerful. I could go on and on. Like, I wish you lived closer. I want to be your friend. Like, I want to like go and have dinner and have all the conversations, but I want to respect your time. I know you have an event coming up, and this is like a space where you really do this work and take these women through these processes. Can you tell me about that and how people can learn about it coming up in November, where it's going to be? Give me all the juicy details.
Yes, thank you for asking. It's going to be at the Phoenix Convention Center, November 2nd and 3rd. And it is going to be 2 full, incredible days where we are going to release and rebuild. And there's even this incredible packing list that comes to the women via email after they've signed up, because we are also making this like a massively expressed through outfits experience. So experiential in all parts of, all 5 senses. So I really want us to have so much fun with this show and what's going to be happening in that room. Because aside from a Taylor Swift or Beyonce concert or Pink concert, I don't know where we as women, and those concerts have men too, but where we as women, 1,000 of us get together and have that kind of release and reclamation and dance party and debauchery all in 2 days together. Being a woman, I want it to feel this good, and I want it to be without the gaze of men.
I want to come. And I want to bring all of my girlfriends. And
You're so close. Come.
Yeah. So we'll have to make that happen. Where can people learn about that? Where is it online? Where can they get the details?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram and TikTok, just Midlife Muse. And then my website is my name, amandahanson.com.
Okay, we're going to make sure to put all of that in the show notes. I hope you run, don't walk, to go follow her if you're not already following her, and to sign up for this event, because I know it's going to be absolutely transformational. Like, this is the real work. When we say do the work, this is the work. This is the work of coming home to yourself, of learning to express yourself fully. We can't get to the point where we're deeply embodied, confident, powerful women if we don't go to those places, if we hide, and if we continue to play on the sidelines as scared little girls. We have to be those warrior women that go to those places that feel scary, but you learn what you're capable of. You learn what you have like within you and how resilient you are. And I'm just so glad that there are women like you that are leading spaces like this, because this is what will change the world.
Thank you so much for having me, Tori. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Until next week, you guys, I just want to say thank you for tuning into the show. I hope this has served you. I trust that it did. If you know a woman that could benefit from this conversation, please share it with them. Share it with your friends, family, loved ones. You don't know how much hearing a conversation like this could change the trajectory of someone's life. My life has changed because someone did that for me. So I hope that you will extend this gift to someone that you love, and maybe even sign up for this experience and go on this journey for yourself. Make sure to go follow Dr. Amanda Hanson, the Midlife Muse, and make sure to tune in next week for another episode of the Coachable Podcast.